Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Before we jump into today's presentation, you will receive a copy of the presentation slides, and this webinar is being recorded and will be made available to you after today. Please note in your attendee panel that there is a box to ask any questions as they come to you, and we'll answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. My name is Carrie Gillum, and I'm the Director of Marketing here at Talemetry. We're excited to be here with you today and share the results of the 2018 Fortune 500 Conversion Audit. There's such a significant investment made in attracting and engaging candidates today, and yet 70 to 80% of those candidates will never complete the process to either apply for a job or join a talent network. There's a tremendous amount of lost opportunity and, quite honestly, waste. So we're excited to share the findings of our research with you today. I'd like to introduce our two speakers today, Madeline Laurano and Pete Sanidas. Madeline Laurano is the co-founder and Chief Research Officer of Aptitude Research Partners. Madeline's primary focus over the last 12 years has been on the talent management market, specializing in talent acquisition. Her work helps companies both validate and reevaluate their strategies and understand the role that technology can play in driving business outcomes. She's watched HCM transform from a back office function to a strategic company initiative with a focus on partnerships, experience, and efficiency. Pete Sanidas is Vice President at Talemetry. Pete has spent almost 20 years helping enterprise organizations to attract and recruit the best talent. Under Pete's leadership, Talemetry has completed this audit of the Fortune 500 conversion processes. Pete's passionate about bringing modern marketing best practices and efficiency to the corporate recruiting world. So with that, welcome Madeline and Pete, and I'll hand it over to you, Madeline.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about strategies for improving your conversion rates and a strategic conversion process. This is, to me, a very exciting topic, and thrilled to be here with Pete and learn more about the audit that Talemetry worked on this year. I think it's interesting for a few reasons, Pete. I think it's interesting because this is not something that we had talked about 10 years ago, even 5 years ago within talent acquisition. Thinking about how important conversion rates are for the talent acquisition process is a very new area for talent acquisition to think about. And I think the other reason why I love this topic so much is that there's tremendous value and immediate value to a talent acquisition function when organizations really have a more strategic process around their conversion. So we're going to talk about a few different things today. We're going to talk about why conversion is so important for talent acquisition functions. We're going to talk about the common types of candidate conversion. I think there's a misperception that we only talk about conversion right during the apply process and in a very myopic way, but we're going to talk about the many different types of conversion we can think about. And then we're going to talk about, and Pete's going to share some observations from the recent audit that Talemetry worked on. And then finally, we're going to leave you with some different strategies to improve your conversion process and some quick wins that you can start on immediately. So Pete, I'm thrilled to be here with you today and to talk about this topic that I know is very near and dear to your heart.
Yes, and it's a pleasure to have you joining us here with the release of the 2018 findings. Again, this is the second year of Talemetry's Fortune 500 Candidate Conversion Audit report. Excited to share the macro findings here and help continue the path of focusing on results within recruitment marketing, because that's ultimately why we're doing all of this.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot has changed in talent acquisition. A lot has changed in the whole world of recruitment marketing, especially over the past year. And what we're finding is that there aren't enough qualified candidates applying to the right jobs at the right time. I mean, it's amazing to me. We have such low unemployment, and at the same time, we have the shrinking talent pool. It's sort of this unprecedented situation in talent acquisition, and it's become even more complex with companies facing a lot of different pressure to be able to fill positions in a short amount of time with a very limited talent pool. And I'm sure you've seen that directly with the clients you work with and the challenges that they're facing.
We have, and having done this as long as I have, through the ups and downs of the macro economy, this universal challenge of not enough qualified candidates applying to the right jobs at the right time does ring true regardless of the macroeconomy. Organizations, particularly enterprise organizations, tend to be looking for the same types of talent in good economic markets as well as in bad. And so the challenge for filling the roles that you need to fill are kind of universal. And those that are looking at the current trends, and seeing that the current unemployment at historical lows and kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop and for market correction to happen, are kind of in for an awakening, I think, as we look at what's actually happening generationally in the workforce and the expectations of what are currently the two largest generations in the workforce, and by the year 2020 will be the absolute largest generations in the workforce. And those expectations of millennials and Gen Z are going to continue to push the requirements from a talent acquisition technology and recruitment marketing perspective, more so than any of us are accustomed to here in the first 20 years of this millennium.
Yeah, it's very true. It's different expectations and different tools. They expect to be engaged in a very different way that, those of us that are older didn't necessarily think about when we were applying for our jobs, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So with the changes that we're seeing with low unemployment, with the challenges that companies are facing in recruitment and recruitment marketing, there's also this additional complexity, which is increased pressure from the business. We're seeing that business leaders are hyper-focused on talent acquisition. They're really paying attention not only to the strategies that they have in place, but even to the technology that's being used within organizations. This is a study that was done by PwC. It's a study that was done for CEOs, not for HR leaders, not for talent acquisition professionals. And what they found is that 77% of CEOs said that the availability of talent is the greatest threat to their organization. And 60% of those are rethinking their technology. And I think, Pete, a lot of this pressure from business executives, and especially from the C-level, is driving this increased demand for recruitment marketing and the need to pay closer attention to how we're engaging with candidates and how we're thinking about conversion specifically.
Yeah, and not just in a macro sense of are we meeting the KPIs or are we hitting the objective, but really starting to drill in related to which activities are driving results and having some predictability to the talent acquisition function and to recruitment marketing that are more in line with the other functions of the business. And it kind of all comes back to conversion, as we'll talk about quite a bit here over the next hour.
Yeah, not just filling positions as quickly as we can, thinking about a more strategic approach. So lots of challenges facing organizations today, new pressure from the business and thinking about really aligning talent and business objectives. And we're also seeing a new framework. We're seeing talent acquisition not just being comprised of thinking about how do we recruit and move someone along through the interview process, through the screening process, through the offer process, but how can we really focus on what happens before somebody even applies for a job? And this attract area, which we're going to spend a lot of time talking about with conversion, is really where we're seeing a huge increase in investment from organizations. They're thinking about ways that they can improve the way that they engage with talent, nurture talent, convert talent, before someone is even moving along in that process. And I know that's, Pete, a big area of what you focus, and certainly an increased demand that you see every day.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the ways that telemetry has really taken a leadership position here in trying to continue to evolve the parallels between modern B2B and B2C marketing, particularly at scale in enterprise, and the talent acquisition function to that of its marketing brethren, is to put together this evolve recruitment marketing maturity and efficiency framework. And what this framework does is provides both an optimization path as well as an evolution or maturity model related to what we've defined as the 6 areas of recruitment marketing. So you have your inbound marketing, those activities that you do to attract candidates who you don't already know. or that are currently not engaging with any communication that you might have put out towards them. And this is traditionally job postings and job advertisements. The flip side of inbound marketing is outbound marketing. And outbound marketing is really made up of 3 different processes. It's the sourcing of new candidates from resume databases, from social, from the web, to identify candidates. And once you've identified those candidates via sourcing and found them and their contact information, of putting them into some relationship management capability so you can actually segment them and can then conduct the outbound marketing that you want to drive to that particular audience. So whether that's a dedicated campaign for some sort of technical capability or specialty, or ongoing nurturing campaigns of strategic audiences like ongoing diversity communication or ongoing veteran communication. This is all done with the process areas that make up sourcing, relationship management, and outbound marketing. And finally, the last couple recruitment marketing process areas that make up the candidate experience up until the point and through application is candidate engagement and conversion to outcomes. So candidate engagement is that ability to drive the right content in front of the right candidates for them to have a better view of what the opportunity is, what their fit is to the organization, and make those decisions that help the qualified candidates find the right job at the right time. This is primarily done in the digital means via the career site, but this also happens with the use of job recommendation chatbots and a lot of the other elements that can improve that candidate engagement and content capability throughout the candidate's journey. And finally, all of these process areas, amount to nothing in the terms of the day-to-day recruiter unless these candidates actually become actionable applicants, or at least identified non-anonymous candidates to then interact with more outbound marketing or what have you. So that element of conversions and outcomes of getting more candidates to opt in to future communication or directly apply to the opportunities that are a right fit for them are ultimately the results of all this recruitment marketing activity. With that, Madeline, any thoughts here related to the evolved maturity framework as we've laid out here at Talemetry?
Yeah, I really love it because I think it provides a lot of clarity to an area of talent acquisition that is still very ambiguous to companies. I think for a lot of companies, they have been doing or were just doing inbound marketing and thought that was all they needed to do. And for a lot of other companies, they might have been doing inbound and outbound, but weren't thinking about the conversion process. So to me, this is really very clear and it's actionable. It's not overwhelming. It outlines what companies need to do and the strategy they need to do it. And I think where we saw, if we think back even to kind of first generation recruitment marketing and those solutions that companies were using, they weren't ever getting to the conversion process. They might have just had capabilities in place to manage inbound or maybe some outbound marketing that was, doing some targeting, but they weren't really thinking about outcomes. And what I love about the maturity model is you're really looking at how organizations can achieve success.
Absolutely, and I think we'll even highlight some of the inefficiencies of some of those early recruitment marketing technologies that you reference here, and in the ways that conversion was attempted to be addressed, as we still see some of those findings in the Fortune 500 here, particularly to talent networks.
And the best thing is it's getting better and better with, you talk about chatbots, you talk about some of these new capabilities that are becoming now more mainstream. This area of conversion and the outcomes organizations are able to measure are just improving every day.
Absolutely.
And what we found in the research that we've done is that companies that do measure conversion rates are able to outperform their peers. They're 2 times more likely to improve the candidate experience, 3 times more likely to improve quality of hire. Probably not unusual for anyone that has worked on the consumer side or has had a marketing role at some point. We know and live and die by conversion rates, but it's becoming just as important in talent acquisition.
Absolutely. If you have twice as many high quality candidates in the mix, you're certainly going to see an improved experience from the candidate because they're the right fit for the right roles, and they more often are going through the process with great communication and a great feel for what the right opportunity is for them. And at the same time, if you have more selection, you're certainly going to put yourself in a better position to hire the right candidate from selection, from volume.
Yep. So we know candidate conversion is important, but Pete, I love this slide because it really talks about not only this idea of talent acquisition and improved quality of hire and all the metrics we think about in recruitment, but there are serious business metrics that we're looking at here too in terms of cost savings when you think about conversion.
Absolutely. So we've got $200 billion that gets spent worldwide on recruitment marketing activities and recruitment activities annually. And 160 of that is in North America or North American-based companies. So that is going into the inbound recruitment marketing, right? The job postings, the ads, the social, however you're distributing your recruitment advertising dollars, that's inbound recruitment marketing. Or your outbound recruitment marketing dollars, the direct sourcing, the sourcing data subscriptions, the campaigns, the third party, all of that inbound and outbound marketing is driving to some sort of candidate engagement. It might be an improved career site, or should be an improved career site ideally, than just what comes out of the box from most ATSs. It is the employment branding and the content, great advances in the last couple of years of adoption of using video, again, to meet our consumer expectations around the type of content we're looking for, and the recommended content and opportunities to interact with things like chatbots. All of that inbound, outbound marketing is driving to candidate engagement. And all of that candidate engagement is driving, ideally, to conversion. And that is the apply. And unfortunately, still today, heading into 2020, we're seeing that most of that conversion technology is being provided by the applicant tracking system, which isn't really intended to convert the same way that marketing applications or consumer-based applications are intended to convert. The enterprise ATS solutions out there are really intended and have been constructed so that you can do all of the other HCM activities once that one person gets hired, that you can onboard them, that you can get them through their payroll introduction and then manage them as an employee. And so the accuracy of the data for that one person is really important, not necessarily everybody who's expressing interest on the front end. And it's that candidate engagement to application conversion that we typically see have a 70 to 90% failure rate. If we put it another way, most organizations are failing to convert 70% of all the dollars they're investing in the recruitment marketing efforts. People who are ready to click apply and actually click apply now to this job, only 20 to 30% of them finish an application. It's $20 billion or $200 billion worth of value, resulting in $60 billion in throughput there for recruiters to interact with in the applicant tracking system.
Huge missed opportunity.
Yeah, and they're not $5 bills, unfortunately. There are a lot of $5 bills.
And do you think for most companies, they even recognize that missed opportunity? They even recognize that that's not happening?
I think inherently they recognize it. So again, in a former life, worked with one of the big 3 job boards back when there were only 3. So don't mean to age myself, but there was such a time. And conversion and the click to apply ratio have been things that leaders of talent acquisition and recruitment marketing have been looking at for 15 plus years. But there's always been kind of a pointing across to the other side of the fence mentality with, we can't do much more about our application process because that's handled by the ATS. And so I think it's kind of more of a perspective there around who should own conversion. And as we see organizations evolving to have dedicated recruitment marketing and recruiting operations teams, that's really who should own conversion. And when that happens, we see it with our clients, the opportunity to improve results 2, 3, 4-fold rapidly. Certainly exists.
Yeah, and they understand it. I think when you think about how recruitment marketing functions are being evolved, conversion's a big part of what they need to focus on. So it's a priority for them.
Throughout the whole journey. Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you think about that missed opportunity and how companies are not able to convert talent, when you look at the investments that companies make, and this is research that we did this year, we found that most companies are still placing most of their talent acquisition budget and investment in, kind of the basic areas: background screening, ATS assessments, not investing as much in the recruitment marketing. And when you think about everything we just talked about, how we're in this situation where we have low unemployment, a shrinking talent pool, companies are facing increased pressure, we have to engage with talent or we're going to lose them, they're not going to apply, and the impact that can have on our overall business, why aren't we seeing more companies making this investment in recruitment marketing?
Well, yeah, I think, again, it comes down to what perspective we're looking at. But when we look at your findings here, background screening, ATS, assessment, the first three are all about screening and selection. Only when we hit sourcing do we actually see what telemetry would define as a recruitment marketing process. Staffing firms, another variation of sourcing, outsourced sourcing, being number two, being number 5 here in your results and prioritization, and then recruitment marketing being number 3. And when we look at it that way, it really does come down to that decision that organizations need to have is, are we getting enough qualified people applying to the right jobs at the right time or not? And it's that actualization or realization that our real problem is quality into the top end of the funnel, so that our recruiters and our tools, our background screening, our assessment technologies, and our ATS from a efficient workflow of those applicants all comes into play. But clearly the balance of focus is probably not in the right areas in terms of the findings here.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So for companies that might not be as familiar with conversion, kind of really the basics of probably what most companies think about or know when it comes to how we think about conversion in the consumer world.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as consumers, just as people interacting with the internet, which we all are, we all probably have, well, at least 2, but more than likely 3 or 4 different devices connected to the internet within arm's reach of us right now. When we pick up any of those devices and we're interacting, we want to buy something, we want to view something, we want to be entertained, however it is, we expect logins to be optional as consumers and as we head into the year 2020. I know personally, if I am going to purchase something from a site I've never purchased from before, I am likely to bail from that experience if it's going to require me to create another username and password up front, as opposed to maybe start my process as a guest and sign up at the end. So we expect that login to be optional. If we're talking about events, evites, whatever it might be, not only do we expect to see the information about the event and where it's located and the time and all of that detail, but we expect to be able to say, yeah, I'm going. Let other people know we're going. More than just know about the information. Amazon has done a really good job of conditioning us all as consumers to be able to buy with as few clicks as possible. So much so that they branded, one click. And we expect that. We don't expect to have to enter in, 40, 50 pieces of information if the information's already readily accessible on our device, in our browser, or in an account. And finally, when we opt in to mailing lists, when we opt in to a promotional list from a company, we actually expect to be communicated to. In fact, we opt in to see your latest discounts and offers. We expect to actually get those emails. And many of us have conditioned ourselves to, look to see what's the SMS opportunity here as I'm in the checkout line to get an extra 10% off. Almost think of it as the Bed Bath & Beyond effect there of being able to opt into content and receive a discount or an offer as part of that process, that give-get of our information.
I'm guilty.
when we flip that around to the world of recruitment marketing and the conversions in recruitment marketing, not just our consumer expectations, but in recruitment marketing, applications, it's the ultimate conversion, right? That's why we do recruitment marketing, is get more of the right people to apply to the right jobs at the right time. Talent networks. These should be viewed as the opt-in opportunity for candidates to express their interest and share some information so that a brand, so an employment brand, can provide relevant opportunities back to that candidate when they're a fit, or just relevant content back to that candidate when they're a right fit. They shouldn't be confused with job alerts, which is a true opt-in for future opening and fit announcements. So too many organizations, and we'll get into the numbers later, but too many organizations are treating talent networks as job alert opt-ins and vice versa, and they should be two separate things. And finally, events or registration should be the opportunity for candidates to opt in to express that they're interested in attending an event, or even while they're in an event, the opportunity to share their information digitally with that organization for future communication. Really expedite what is already a manual, physical, live, in-person activity with some digital technology to support it.
Yeah, the event, it's amazing to me, especially the event piece, because so many companies do these events, and it's a huge part of talent acquisition, a huge part of their budget, and that future interaction was never part of the event strategy for years and years. We would just capture information at the event, lose information more often than not, and there would be no communication or no opportunities for future interaction.
I think when we look at recruitment marketing as a whole, Madeline, or just conversions, that transactional aspect of something happens, we complete that transaction and we throw out all of the good information and the good outcomes from that, aside from the one hire we make, it really is the pivot point to recruitment marketing optimization. Yeah.
And everyone loses in that situation when we're throwing out those opportunities. Candidates lose, recruiters have to start over. It's a lose-lose. So what goes wrong? I mean, thinking about the conversion process, and it's really something I think about quite a bit, is where does this go wrong? If this is a big focus for talent acquisition, if companies are making this investment in recruitment marketing and they want to be able to see those outcomes, why does it not always work out for organizations? And I think when you look at the consumer world, there's some obvious reasons why conversion doesn't go wrong there, and I think parallels we can make to the candidate side as well. I mean, I think we distract the candidate. Sometimes on our career sites, we certainly include too much information, not the right information. We think more is better. Pete, I'm sure you've seen companies do that quite a bit, where they try to put as much as possible, thinking that content is king, so let's just overwhelm candidates.
See it far too often, yes.
And then we don't add necessary.
Usually a technology limitation there. Treating all candidates as a one-size-fits-all tends to lead you there.
Yeah, exactly. Not targeting the right audience, maybe not even understanding who the audience might be. I think we also see we add unnecessary steps, and I think what would go along with that is that sometimes with all of those steps, we're not even giving candidates a chance to be converted. We're adding all these steps to the process, and we're losing them very early on. And that happened quite a bit in the first generation of recruitment marketing providers. It happens with ATS providers all the time, where we're making them constantly put in their information multiple times without capturing it, and we lose people that way. I'm not going to do that as a consumer. I'm not going to enter in unnecessary information. I'm not going to go through unnecessary steps that will take 20 minutes when I just want to be engaged quickly. And I think that happens quite a bit. And I think it's another technology fail. And then I think we don't think about the details. We don't think about it from the perspective. And I think at a very basic level, we don't go through the experience from the candidate's perspective. We think this is what our technology can do. We think these are the steps we need to take, and we don't think about it from the candidate's perspective, or even as a consumer, what we would want, what we would expect.
And that's the irony of it, right? So we say that our people are our best asset, and the CEOs are telling us that talent is one of their largest concerns within their business, and yet, you know, we're just not having those same considerations we'd have for ourselves as consumers when it comes to the candidate experience. And so much of what you describe here and what we found in our Fortune 500 audits does come back to, you know, the approach and what problem are we trying to solve, and whether it's unnecessary steps, distracting the candidate, not thinking about the actual audience that we're trying to convert here from a high volume job to, you know, a highly sought after technical skill set, whatever it might be. We're not thinking about that audience as we put together our conversion opportunity. And in many cases, the technology that organizations are using to actually convert is the applicant tracking system, which is intended to shorten the list and to narrow the funnel of assessment and selection. And by putting assessment and selection in front of conversion, that is really the limiting factor in all of this, and that ultimately makes for a poor candidate experience and doesn't allow enough candidates to actually get into the hands of recruiters.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I think, you know, even thinking about putting the workload on the candidates, that's what the ATS has been designed to do throughout the entire candidate journey, is make everything easier for the organization and unfriendly for the candidate in many cases. So I think, you know, if we can think about the conversion process and we can think about recruitment marketing as a vehicle to improve that candidate experience, and then ultimately improve the quality that you're bringing into the organization, it's tremendously valuable.
So the big reveal, our 2018 Fortune 500 candidate conversion audit results. So Talemetry evaluated 8 elements in this year's candidate conversion audit. The first element we looked at was whether registration is required as part of the application process. The next 2 areas that we looked at were really those elements and considerations to the candidate of not actually treating them as if it's a data entry job by having to fill out a bunch of information that's already on their resume or in their social profile, but by using the latest technologies, you know, the Web 3.0 standards of portability of information that's already publicly available on the internet. We did look at campus and event capabilities and how Fortune 500 organizations are looking at trying to convert those areas a little bit better than in the past. And then the two passive capture or opt-ins of talent networks and job alerts. So on our yeah, go ahead, Madeline.
Yeah, and I mean, I love how you break down the audit, and I think, you know, this is just really interesting research to me. It's, you know, your analysis showing that 90% of the Fortune 500 career sites required candidates to create a registration with the new ID and password before they could even continue. And I know lots of friends that have applied for a job and have had pretty similar situations, which have been, you know, ultimately negative candidate experiences.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling here in late 2018 that 90% of the experiences look something like this. A candidate clicks apply now on a job description. Now, it's probably not the first time they've seen that job description if we think about their entire journey, where they started on a job board, wherever it might have been, or in a recruiter's email, said, yeah, that's me, clicked on that link, read the description, read the requirements, said, yeah, that's me, clicked apply. We're met again with an apply now button, and finally they click it. They think they're going to get there, and they're met with this register, create an account. And this is actually a friendly one, believe it or not, because it tells me what my limitations are from a password requirement perspective. Many of these enterprise ATS experiences don't even tell you what the secret code is to creating a password in their world. What we found here at Talemetry, and having done resume parsing and extraction for a long time now, is that about 50% of the candidates that click apply now on that job description that then links into a process like this with a password as the first step, drop off immediately. So you had 100 people click apply now, and only 50 of them get past this step. There's no single way of improving your recruitment marketing results than removing this requirement.
Great, and I think this is interesting as well. It's thinking about the applications will require 50 to 100 fields of data, all the same data that the candidates likely are readily available on their social profile. And this is to me where you lose so many candidates, especially someone that might not be even interested in leaving their current job or considering your organization. We require
Absolutely.
so many. We would never do this as consumers. We would never be required to enter this much data.
Certainly not. And again, even if it's just content, right? Even if it's just a website, think of a Pinterest or something like that, where there's just content behind the password or the username requirement on that site. They're using things like OAuth so that I can just use my Facebook account or my Google account to quickly register for that site. So they still have my information, but I'm not entering in data fields. And in that case, we're typically talking about my first name, my last name, and my email address, let alone all the fields of data that are required and should be relevant to get into the assessment process against a job requisition. Now, enterprise organizations, the Fortune 500 in particular, have improved on using social career profiles here in the past year. So we're up to about 70% of the Fortune 500 are letting candidates use their LinkedIn, their Indeed, their social profile that hopefully has some career history information in it to start that application process. But there's a lot of people that quite frankly are apprehensive of using their LinkedIn account to start applying for a job with a new employer out of fears that maybe that would show up on that social network, or they click the wrong button and they just don't want that to be visible. And so the other option there is resume parsing, but in a world where we're all using iDevices or what have you, cloud storage becomes a big thing because most phones, tablets, whatever, don't have the most up-to-date version of a resume, but someone who's active in their job hunt are very likely to have that in their Dropbox, in their Google Drive or whatnot. And we've actually seen a decline of Fortune 500 organizations leveraging cloud storage in the application process. And that's just a step in the wrong direction again, as we're heading to a world where the majority of workers in the workforce are millennial or younger. Yeah,
and they're using their phone, and conversion rates, we know this from the consumer world, improve dramatically when we're mobile optimized.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a hard time just describing anything, talking about it being mobile optimized with this generational shift that's occurring. We won't even raise our hand for a taxi anymore. The first thing we do is look down at our phone and start finding our Uber or our Lyft, right?
Yep, it's 100%. I do it.
So as we look at what is an optimized candidate experience for applications, the CDW example here is a great example. So within the job description, a candidate can click apply and immediately are met with an initial screen that says, hey, give me your first name, your last name, and your email address. Not, hey, please log in or create an account. From there, the very next step is candidate. How would you like to start filling out our application process? Would you like to upload a resume that you have locally? Would you like to use social profiles from LinkedIn or from Google or Indeed? Would you like to upload from cloud storage from Dropbox, Google Drive, or OneDrive? Once that's happened, all the information's parsed out. A candidate can quickly edit anything that maybe didn't parse correctly or that they want to add more detail to. Still follow and enter in the same self-identification information that's a part of that ATS workflow, or any, in their case, they're a Taleo environment, so you can still do the Taleo ACE questions. And once all of that's done, application is complete. It's written into the ATS as if the candidate had just gone through that Taleo experience. And these are real case study numbers here for CDW with an 83% application completion rate from candidates clicking apply now on that job description to completing the application process and being in the ATS for recruiters to start working. 83% in a Fortune 500 organization on very large volumes of candidates, proving that drop-off doesn't have to be standard fare, but can be addressed and significantly improve the volume of candidates that recruiters get to work with in filling positions with quality talent.
That's amazing, 83.1% of application completion. This is one of my favorite topics because I feel like this is where we've seen so much change in recruitment marketing and in how companies are thinking about their campus recruiting efforts. And it's such a big part of talent acquisition and always has been, but it's such an opportunity to make some significant changes in a very immediate way.
Yeah, I would agree. And, this is the one area where we've seen a really, really good improvement for organizations year over year in terms of really thinking about how do we convert this campus talent. We've seen this year 33% plus organizations are giving candidates an ability to find the relevant information related to their campus or event hiring, to actually explore the jobs that are related to those events or to their campus programs, and then also, potentially even register for those events. This is up significantly year over year. And I think, just observationally, one of the biggest reasons for it is this is an audience that's really easy to define. And it's also an audience that, no one will argue that they need to be accommodated to from a mobile, modern, post-internet birth world, right? These candidates in particular, these students, have expectations about how technology should work for them. And organizations realize that if they put a bad experience in front of a 21 or 22-year-old, that candidate is going to think that the technology and that workplace environment might be a little outdated for them and not a good fit. And so, kind of with that narrow focus, we see the Fortune 500 doing a good job. Our suggestion here at Talemetry, and we'll get to it in a bit, is to take that same type of focus to your other prioritized audiences to improve conversion. The other thing that we'd say here is it is a best practice to make sure that whatever you're doing here to convert this talent, that you're using a CRM or some relationship management capabilities to not be transactional the way Madeline described earlier of collecting and then doing nothing with that information, but to actually maintain ongoing communication with this audience, send them targeted messaging, make sure that you're able to market the next time you're going to be on their campus. So, this kind of brings together those process areas to have significantly improved outcomes.
Great. And the next area, talent networks. I mean, I think this is an area we take for granted when we think about conversion, because companies that are familiar with it or have invested in recruitment marketing may have started with talent networks. But, it's amazing to me still how much improvement we could see on the conversion side here.
So talent networks, I think, based upon what you just described there, is actually one of the conversion areas that we saw go in two directions here this year. First of all, there's less Fortune 500s offering an opt-in talent network. That's not a good thing. More often than not, there's not a good fit, or quite frequently, there's not a good fit for a candidate of your available opportunities. But if they've gone as far as identifying your brand as an organization or a brand that they would like to work for, and have gotten into trying to find the right opportunities that you have available today and they just haven't found them, you should be offering them an opportunity to express interest in your organization. So abandoning this strategy is not a good idea. And unfortunately, we're seeing the Fortune 500 do that just at a 1 or 2% clip. Now, the other side of that, of forcing candidates who want to apply to a job into a talent network, as we're seeing here in this animation, what we call the forced talent network, that's also not a good thing. And the positive is that's actually dropped from around 12% in 2007 to 7% of the Fortune 500 doing a forced talent network in 2017, or excuse me, in 2018. The better process is when someone clicks apply now, feed them into the actual application process, take that application, get their consent, and automatically move them into your CRM or a talent network. And then truly give candidates the option to opt into talent networks if they don't have a job to apply now to. Makes a big difference, and I think we're seeing from from Indeed and some others that are concerned about the candidate experience a push away from this double data entry that was really a limitation of some of those 1.0 technologies.
Yeah, the famous double apply, that they'd have to collect information multiple times.
Yes, talk about lack of consideration for the candidate, right?
Exactly. And then the next area, the job alerts. So 61% of Fortune 500 are utilizing job alerts, which is great, but 39% are missing the simple form of remarketing.
Yeah, and I think one of the confusing aspects of job alerts to candidates as we see it is, and we didn't actually document it, although I think we probably will next year, is many of these organizations, the 61% that are using job alerts, are actually using multiple forms of job alerts. There's far too many talent networks out there that are really just a job alert subscription that then have an ATS job alert element behind it. So if you're a recruitment marketing operations person looking at conversion, take a look at how you're allowing candidates to opt into job alerts and how many different versions of that. You might have looked at it as you reevaluated your compliance and your GDPR aspects of things. But if you haven't, check to see how many of these different job alert systems you have running and how that might be creating some chaos for the candidate. And we would recommend that you tend to defer to the one that you're going to put in front of most candidates in your candidate engagement process areas, aka your career site, and stick with that one if you can prioritize or simplify down to one. The last two areas that we looked at in this year's conversion audit aren't purely conversion, but they're based upon where the majority of the inbound marketing actually starts, and that's with Indeed and with Google for Jobs. So Indeed has the capability now with some technology providers to allow a candidate to be on Indeed, look at a job posting, click apply, and start that application process right there on Indeed using their Indeed profile without having to ever link off to the ATS's job description or the career site's job description. Unfortunately, as we looked at the Fortune 500, less than 5% of the Fortune 500 organizations are using this extremely considerate conversion process that results in practically no drop off from site to site, and is a big miss, and adding completely unnecessary complexity to the candidate's journey. And it's certainly an element that telemetry will be keeping a close eye here moving forward. As we looked at the efficiency map earlier, this actually removes an entire element to candidate conversion from most organizations' #1 source of hire. Madeline, what kind of observations have you seen related to Indeed traffic and organizations really contemplating how to make the most of that traffic?
Yeah, it's such an interesting time for Indeed and for Indeed users, because I think a lot of companies are trying to figure out, what's the best way to use Indeed and how can we think about that traffic. And Indeed as an organization is making some changes, and I think we're going to see continued changes over the next year. But I think, the more organizations can communicate what either their frustrations are or, what they're hoping and how they're using Indeed, I think the more we're likely to see all of this evolve. But I think I think this year is going to be a pivotal year.
Would agree. And the one thing that's constant in this world is rapid change. Yeah. Which brings us to Google for Jobs. Right? The entity that most of us know pretty familiar with Google and in the world of recruitment, kind of been sitting on the sidelines until 2017. But CareerBuilder did a study in 2015 and found that 73% of all job seekers identified starting their job search on Google. Now, what's interesting here from the telemetry conversion audit is that almost half, 46.4% of all Fortune 500 organizations have no direct indexing of their available jobs happening on Google for Jobs. That doesn't mean their jobs aren't on Google for Jobs, but they're going through intermediaries. So that might be going through Glassdoor or through a job board, LinkedIn, whatever it might be. But you have very little control and you face a lot of drop off when your job content is going through 1, 2, 3 other parties between Google and you. On top of that, 35% of the organizations that do have indexing have it happening on their career site where they've got all that great content, but almost 20% who have their jobs being indexed and who most likely as Fortune 500s have a better career site experience with better content than just the ATS job description. 18.7% of them are linking just to that ATS job description, which means that candidates most likely aren't ever getting to the quality content.
It's amazing. It's, again, such a missed opportunity. I mean, Google's changed so much of how candidates are looking for jobs and, provided opportunities for employers. But it's amazing to see that just at 18%.
I would
and
encourage
do you think no, they just don't know that that's an option, or do you think it's limitations with their ATS or current providers are using?
I think there's a handful of answers there. I think the first step for anybody after this call, or even open up another browser and multitask a little bit more, is jump in and take a look at what jobs look like and what the process looks like for candidates looking for your jobs on Google. And check to see, are they coming to our career site? Are they coming to our ATS job descriptions? Or can they only go to other job boards that have indexed our jobs? That's step number 1. And step number 2 would be to talk to your career site provider about improving that. So overall, we've seen here in the last year a slight uptick in Fortune 500 organizations who are demonstrating best practices. Little over 4% last year, we're at 5.3%. So a pretty significant increase of almost 10% in those that kind of fall into that next tier of opportunity for improvement and on the cusp of demonstrating best practices. And the number one way for that 22% to join the demonstrating best practices would be to have an application solution that doesn't require a username and password. Obviously, with those two categories improving, we've seen less organizations fall into the category of poor performance or failing practices. Pretty significant decrease in the failing practices, yet we're still almost at 250 of the 500 Fortune 500 falling into the lowest grading category, and significantly worse than that 5% demonstrating universal best practices. So a lot of opportunity for the most of the Fortune 500, and for most of you who are probably sitting outside of the Fortune 500, to do better than the big guys. And that's again, conversion and optimizing conversion is an equalizer regardless of your recruitment marketing budget or the size of your organization. You can really make a big dent in competing against others by focusing on conversion. So
that's an important point. It's an equalizer. It's something that improves any company regardless of size and puts them on an even playing field.
Absolutely. And I think where to begin making that change. From our perspective, it starts with your audiences. So historically, recruitment and talent acquisition, the audience has been the candidates who are a good fit for this particular job requisition. But when we're talking about enterprise recruitment and Fortune 500, there's economies of scale here, just like there are in everything else in your business. And start with prioritizing what are audiences that are most important to us, whether that's job function, whether that's specific roles that are hired in volume, whether that's geographies or combinations of those. We tend to call those key talent areas here at Talemetry. You also probably have some strategic audiences that need to be prioritized and contemplated end-to-end for recruitment marketing, but end-to-end within conversion. Examples of strategic audiences would be your diversity inclusion programs or sub-programs within diversity inclusion, women in technology, for example, veteran hiring, experienced hiring, in terms of executive hiring and those that might operate outside of the traditional talent acquisition funnel. And then finally, there are those relationship-based audiences, employee referrals, past employees, the emerging gig and contingent workforce, right? Where you know the people that are in that audience, you have a relationship with them. And how do you think about the ways of putting them through an application process or a conversion process that's more considerate of the relationship you have with them than the way you would treat somebody who you've never met with before and could or could not be a good fit for your organization or a particular role. The next area we look at is, just review the candidate conversion journey. You can start at the beginning with the aggregators like Indeed and Google for Jobs, like we talked about a little bit in our data, or you can just start on your career site and look at what it looks like to convert as a candidate. I can tell you for a fact, we experience this many times where an organization will say they want to improve the candidate experience and they start engaging with telemetry, and it's not until a few conversations deep till someone actually steps back and puts themselves in a candidate's shoes for the first time in many years. And it's definitely an eye-opener there. Look at your metrics. Now, this is a limited capability for most organizations. Many of the ATSs out there in the enterprise space don't actually start tracking applicant drop-off until after the username and password's been created. So this might take some duct tape of bringing together your website analytics, your Google Analytics, or even adding them and doing a short-term metric trial just to see what's actually happening there from a candidate conversion perspective. But look at your analytics. They will tell you what you need to improve and where you need to improve it. And finally, optimize from the end of the journey all the way back to the beginning. And by that, I mean, most recruitment marketing optimization is either focused, when we talk about conversion, is focused on how do we add more screening questions into the application process, or what can we do in the actual application process? Or conversely, it's where do we put the jobs in front of the right audiences, right? Which job board's the best fit for this type of audience? What you should actually do is start at the end and work your way back against that evolve map. Start with conversion. Do we have conversion against this audience, from optional or opt-in to job alerts to talent networks to application process? Okay, now what is that candidate engagement? What's the content look like for that audience? Okay, now how are we doing outbound marketing to that audience, and how do we make sure that we can remarket to them when we need to, and how do we do our inbound? Start at the end and work your way back. You'll see your biggest uplift in results in terms of continuous improvement by approaching it that way. Madeline, anything here related to kind of the where to begin that really strikes a chord with your findings, your research, and interactions?
Yeah, I think the other thing is be a champion for it. I think so often there's a tendency, and you talked about this earlier in the presentation, to point fingers and say, this might not be our responsibility, or, we'll just wait on this till someone assigns it to us. This is an area where you're going to see a lot of results very quickly, and it's going to give you a lot of credibility within the organization and give you leverage to push through a lot of your own talent acquisition initiatives and programs that you want to get started. So to be a champion of that and to, really understand this and get it started, I think is an important way to get started, get excited about it.
Excellent. Well, that hour just flew by, Madeline. So really appreciate your participation here with us and a topic that we are so passionate about here at Talemetry with candidate conversion. Wanted to open it up and see if we've had any questions come in, Carrie.
Yeah, we had a question come in similar to what we just talked about with the ownership is, within the consumer side, we see a lot of chief conversion officers. There's a question that came in, does there need to be a dedicated role focused on the conversion process within talent acquisition?
That would be glorious. Most talent acquisition teams are not staffed to the level where they can have someone dedicated to candidate conversion, but there should absolutely be an accountability within recruiting operations or recruitment marketing that focuses on conversion. And I think this goes back to what we described earlier. Why is this not a prioritized focus? And that is that accountability from our experience in terms of having meaningful results probably is best served not being with HRIS or the HCM administrator. that accountability is best served being with the same team that's making decisions around your strategic spend of advertising dollars, because that's where the value of conversion is going to have the greatest impact and the best view of what's actually important in terms of quality converting through the funnel.
Great, and I think we're at the top of the hour. So thank you so much, Pete. This is great. I certainly learned a ton, and this information and the audit you did is I think hugely valuable for organizations. Where can they find out more if they need more information on this and they want to learn more?
Absolutely. So the official report is coming out here in just the next handful of business days. We will be publishing the aggregate data of the Fortune 500 in that report. You'll be able to find that on telemetry.com. Additionally, if an organization, whether you're a Fortune 500 or outside of the Fortune 500, would like us to provide you with your individual results, contact us here via telemetry.com and request for information. We'll be happy to put together an individualized report on your organization. And finally, a little plug for the Evolve Maturity Model. There's an element of self-assessment of your current conversion capabilities in the Evolve maturity self-assessment found at telemetry.com/evolve, in which you can actually do that all on your own and find out where you stand related to the maturity model.
Great.
With that, thank you again, Madeline, and everyone for your participation today.